like, share, and subscribe if you already haven't. Also, be sure to check People's Podium News out on Instagram at People's Podium News. But today we're going to be talking about the Biden-Harris administration and what lies ahead. What will the administration be facing as they take on this country and try to undo some of the damage that has been done by the COVID pandemic and other divisions that we have faced over the last 4 years. But especially in this last year or so, we've really faced some challenges. And so I do want to say one thing before I get started on this. Anytime you see opinion piece on any of these videos, you can be sure that it's unscripted. It's just exactly what it says, an opinion, and just some reflecting on what's going on generally right now. This is a space where I love to hear some feedback in the comments. I love to make it as much as a collaborative space where we can talk and work through some of these things together. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are and what you'd like to see from the Biden-Harris administration. But without further ado, I'd like to jump into it. Obviously, the biggest thing that the Biden-Harris administration faces right now, the biggest challenge, is tackling this pandemic. COVID has just completely obliterated our economy, which was actually not doing so bad before this pandemic. Whether or not you supported the past administration or not, whether or not you attribute that to the success of the previous administration, is totally your call. But the economy wasn't doing so bad, and this pandemic has absolutely crippled working class America. And when we talk about working class America, we're talking about most of America. Most people don't work, and in these giant corporations, right? If they do, they're working on the lower half of that, actually producing whatever product or commodity or whatever service that this corporation uses to generate its profits, right? And these people aren't paid handsomely, and so as a result, you have a lot of working class Americans right now who have been sent home since last March. We are now almost in February, and some of them have not been called back to work. Some of these jobs possibly are gone forever, and we wonder how we can put working class Americans back in a position where they're stable, where they're able to provide for their families, and where they're able to take care of themselves and protect themselves. And so that's one really big challenge ahead of this administration. One thing that has been thrown around is a possibility of a second round of stimulus checks. We've seen other countries around the world distribute these payments to people who are left out of work. But a larger problem looms in America, especially because we have traditionally had problems with working class families being able to provide for themselves even before this pandemic. And so at a time where the country is struggling and really, really, really suffering because of this pandemic especially, we ask ourselves, do we correct this problem in short term, or do we look for more sweeping, more reformative change? Do we change these systems that got us here in the first place? Because we have to ask ourselves, if all it took, people have been struggling for a long time now. Let's be serious here. Working class families have been struggling for a long time now. But if all it took was a few months off of work to throw the entire economy, the entire balance of things off, did we have a stable system to begin with? And I think that's a question we should ask ourselves. Is this a time to correct that and also safeguard ourselves against future things like this? Will this be the last time we face challenges like this? We hope not, right? But we don't really know. And so maybe this is a chance for the Biden-Harris administration to not just create patchwork around some of the damage that has been done by this pandemic, but maybe it's also an opportunity for sweeping reformative change to some of our systems, making sure that working class families are protected and safeguarded so that nothing like this can ever possibly put working class families out on the streets, have them worried about whether or not they can pay their rent or mortgages going forward. I think this could be a great opportunity for the Biden-Harris administration to really make a mark and leave its legacy as a truly reforming and progressive administration. I know that word sometimes gets thrown around and tied too closely to the politics, but when we're talking about being progressive, we're talking about moving us forward as a nation to actually help us grow and be better so that our systems represent the America of today and not the America of decades ago. So that's a big challenge that this administration faces, and what stands between this administration and successfully doing that is exactly what Joe Biden called for in his inaugural address. He called for unity, and while calls for unity are needed right now, some Americans, a lot of Americans probably, would probably say that more so than unity, we need leadership. And so Joe Biden has to take it upon himself as the leader of this nation at this point, in my estimation, to be a leader of all Americans, which I think that he understands, but also to be a courageous and brave leader, a leader that is actually going to represent the people, whether or not that challenge seems daunting. So whether or not Mitch McConnell and Republicans are going to be obstructive to his path, or whether or not former Trump supporters will be unappreciative of his efforts, he has to be sure that what he's doing is right for working class families that elected him, no matter how unpopular it may be with the other side. And so I understand the need for unity, but we can't sacrifice doing what is needed and necessary for working class families in exchange for simple unity. We can't be complacent, and we surely cannot make concessions. So that's my thought on that. Another thing I think this administration is going to have to fairly quickly make a stance on is whether or not any of the deeds that occurred over the last year or so, in particular, especially in regards to disregarding our Constitution, disregarding the laws of our land, and whether the people that led that movement will be held accountable. As you see right now, we have the impeachment trial looming for a former president. That has never happened in United States history. And so I have noticed that this administration has been fairly silent on this issue, on whether or not they wanted to push for it or not. I would presume that behind closed doors, Joe Biden actually probably doesn't want to push forward with this impeachment trial at this moment, for the simple reason that this is going to be a scar on what Joe Biden sees this whole unity pitch to be. When Joe Biden speaks on unity, if you pay close attention, he's asking for the Trump supporters and far-right conservatives who didn't want him to be elected, once he was fairly elected and legitimately elected, disregarded him. He's asking them almost for forgiveness. He's asking them almost to work with us. And I think that might be a mistake in him. And I see why he you gotta understand. I see why he falls there, because he is a politician of old. I mean, he's from the old America that I think is no longer with us, in large part. An America where civility is more important than anything. We no longer have that kind of culture here in this country. But I do think that he means well, and that they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but I think he has to really leave that behind, because the thing that is necessary most of all is for our country to heal. And I think that he thinks that we can heal without justice being served, and you can't have healing without justice. And so I think that we need to hold these people accountable, make sure that they have no place in leadership positions in our country going forward, because they almost tore apart this republic. And we can definitely do better than people who are willing to sacrifice everything in this nation for their own personal desires. Losing and winning elections is a part of politics. People who can't accept that should not jump into the race. It's that simple. And people who incite acts of terrorism, people who disregard our Constitution, disregard our values of democracy and fair elections, don't have a place in leadership positions. I think that Joe Biden has to take a staunch stance on this, because it will also show the people who supported him that once he gets in, he's the exact kind of person that they didn't want to begin with. A get along, go along politician. Make the status quo keep going. We should note that the reason that Donald Trump was successful in becoming president in the first place is because status quo politicians are no longer going to flow for the people. Whether you're on the left, whether on the right, whether you're black, whether you're white, people are tired of status quo politicians. And I think that the Democratic establishment should take note of Donald Trump's rise to success. Someone like Bernie, who's also a populist candidate, was very popular for a reason. Someone like Donald Trump won on the Republican side over people like Ted Cruz, who are established career politicians, for a reason. The people are tired of these go along, get along, keep the status quo politicians. People do want revolutionary change on both sides. Now, how they want that is different, of course, but people are not satisfied with the systems that we have. So I think that the biggest theme, the biggest challenges ahead of this administration will have to do with whether or not they decide to be a progressive and reformative administration, or whether or not they choose to be get along, go along, keep the status quo. I think that it will be a severe calculation if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris decide to maintain the status quo. I think it may cost them their re-election in the next 4 years, because we have a lot of challenges ahead of us. This pandemic has caused so much damage. This is not going to go away. People are not going to forget this, even if it does. Even if everything does get better by 2022, doesn't mean people are going to forget that they were suffering this last year. Look at George Bush and what happened after 2008. I say this almost jokingly, but I say it pretty seriously as well. He did so bad, and I heard this. I think I heard this from a comedian. I can't remember who, but he did so bad in managing the economy that middle working class Americans, white working class Americans, had a choice between a career politician, war hero, John McCain in 2008, and a young, for the time, somewhat progressive candidate who was going to hold big businesses accountable. And they chose the young black candidate. That's speaking volumes to how tired Americans have been for a long time of the status quo. We haven't seen the status quo maintained in over a decade. If we really look back at the politics at the national level, status quo politicians are a thing of the past. They are a relic of old America. We have to move forward. We have to be progressive. I think that will be the true and telling legacy mark, the legacy indicator of the Biden-Harris administration. That will also tell us whether or not in 2024, if they seek re-election, or if Kamala Harris decides to run for a higher office, that'll really be the determiner, I believe. That'll be what determines whether or not Americans want any more to do with the Democratic establishment, who they suggest. I think this could be a serious turning point in American politics, because on one side you have the Republican Party, who's without an identity. The guy that they were riding on the coattails of, Donald Trump, he's lost power. He's facing a second impeachment that may have him barred from holding public office. You have, on the left side, a largely disengaged Democratic base. People are looking at this and wondering, what will these politicians do for me? These are the same people I've been complaining about, and I'm tired of it. So let's see what happens. I'm curious to see, what do you want to see from the Biden-Harris administration? Is it student debt forgiveness? That ties into the pandemic a lot. A lot of people who are young and freshly out of college are unable to find career opportunities because the jobs just aren't there, because this pandemic has crushed our economy. Is it healthcare reform? We know we need that. Look at what our hospitals were dealt in this pandemic. Look at the hand our first responders and frontline workers were dealt in this, excluding police. First responders meaning EMTs, etc. So what do we do from here? What do we need from here? What do we want from here? I'd love to hear in the comments, what do you all want to see from this administration? Until next time, like I said, please like, share, subscribe. Follow People's Podium News on Instagram at People's Podium News, and I'll catch you later. Thanks.